Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're regular here, you know I review many photographic, audio and video related products. Well, hopefully you know by now, and if you're new here, well, that's what I do. Now, I've recently taken a look at many stills and video cameras, but two particular ones that people have been very interested in. I've looked at the Panasonic Lumix S5 full frame camera. This is the one here. Great piece of kit, one of my favourite cameras, and I love using it. I've recently bought an 85mm lens for it, and I've got it here fitted to it at the moment, the 20 to 60 kit lens. So that's one of them. But the other one that I really like is the Canon EOS R, and I do love the grip on the Canon EOS R. This is a great camera, and it's got, you know, very similar features to the Panasonic S5. Now, several people have asked me which one is the best one to buy. If you're not in any particular camp, if you're in the Canon EF camp, so you've been using Canon DSLRs, then it may be worth looking at the Canon EOS R or the R5 or the R6 if you've got money to be able to spend on those cameras. But if you're not in a particular camp, it may well be worth looking at the Panasonic S5, or obviously the Sony A7Rs, the A7 IIIs. Oh, there's many different variety of full frame cameras about. But what I'm looking at today is, I hate using the word comparison, because every manufacturer and every camera has its own unique features that may be specific to somebody, but that's what they really need, so that's why they bought that particular camera, regardless of what the other features are. So you can't knock any of them really, because they've all got pros and cons. But I feel I do like to point out, you know, the strengths of one over the strengths of the other, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, the other is a better camera. So what we're going to do today, we are just going to have a quick look at the overall differences between these two cameras, and not look at the other ones, such as the Sonys and the what other ones are there? There's loads of others, isn't there? Leicas, if you've got that sort of money, Pentaxes, if you're into Pentax. So let's have a look at the Canon EOS R and the Panasonic S5. So overall, they're both very similar cameras. The S5's a 24 megapixel full frame camera, full frame sensor inside that one, and the EOS R is a 30 megapixel full frame sensor. Image quality, as far as stills are concerned, are going to be, you know, relatively similar. I think even though this has got an extra 6 megapixels, it's not going to make a massive difference. It's not really going to make any difference in the overall scheme of things. If you're printing really large prints, you may well find the, you know, 30 megapixels that comes off the Canon EOS R is, you know, that bit better. But the dynamic range of a Panasonic is a bit better than a dynamic range you get on the Canon EOS R. And what I mean by that is for editing your raw files. You've got a little bit more latitude on the Panasonic files than what you have on the Canon. But again, if you get your exposure almost spot on the day, or as close as you can, you're not really going to see much difference between either or. Now, the body wise, the S5 is got far more it's got far more functions you can set and you can adjust button wise. So on the top here you've got dedicated ISO, white balance and exposure compensation dials on the top of the camera. So you've got those three buttons there. They are assignable. You can assign whatever you want to these buttons, and that's a great feature. And also no end of, you know, customizable function buttons on the back of the camera. And you've got your mode dial on the top here for setting single shot, multiple shots, self timer, etc., on the top there. And you've got your front, rear and back exposure dials, so for the setting your apertures, your shutter speeds and what have you. So for example, if you're in aperture priority, let's turn her on. Let's put that into, if you're in aperture priority, which we The front dial will adjust the aperture. We might not be able to see that. It's a very small display actually, but that will adjust the aperture. And I've got the back dial set for exposure compensation, so I don't actually need to use the exposure compensation button. I can just I can reassign that for something else. I haven't reassigned it. It is still set for exposure compensation, and it's great. You just push one button in, that'll bring up the ISOs when you turn the dial to adjust the ISO settings, and the same with white balance. Push the white balance button in, and then you can adjust your white balance settings. So very, very customizable camera and a lovely feel to it. It's a really strong, really well made feel to it, and it's a great, body wise great. The grip is great. Everything about the handling of the S5 is absolutely great. Full touchscreen, so touch to focus, touch to adjust your settings. Going into your menu, you can adjust your menu by using the touchscreen. Everything moves around quite happily, you know. So extremely customizable. So that's that. Now with the Canon EOS R, the on-off switch is on the other side of the camera. Now some people do find that frustrating because you can't use it with one hand. You've got to use both hands to turn it on and off. It's, you know, it can get frustrating, but it's not that frustrating. It's just one of those things, you know. But that turns it on. What I do like about the Canons is with the Sonys, and quite a few of them, certainly the Fujis, you have to try and get your finger in under the flap to pull the flap out. This has got a proper little cutaway there to get your finger in to get the screen out, and I think that's great. And again, you've got your 3-inch articulating screen, the same as on the S5 over there. Fully customizable buttons on the top here, not as many, and it's got one function here called mode. So you push that mode button in, then you can use one dial on the back here to scroll through your different functions. So it's a sort of a multi-function dial. Not as quick as having lots of separate dials. So I think from a function point of view, the S5 scores for being able to set different function buttons, set it up how you like. It's even got a function button on the front of the camera. So if that is your, you know, your thing, having lots of different function buttons for setting up for different things, then the S5 scores over the Canon. But once you get used to it, it's fine. Absolutely fine. And a lot of it is touchscreen, and the touchscreen on the Canon, I think the implementation is just that little bit better than it is on the Panasonic, and you know, it's great. It's a really nice little touchscreen. It works really well. Take the lens cap off. So you scroll through the different things by using the info button, and that will scroll through the different displays. But say for example you're in the quick menu, it's difficult to see what I'm doing while I've got it behind me, but so you click on the quick button there and it brings up the range of quick functions. Sony has it, they call it the function button. Panasonic have it, they call it the Q menu, the Q button. On the Panasonic, instead of it being on the screen, it's a physical button. So you just push this Q button in, and then the quick menu comes up and you can scroll through the different things you've got programmed into that quick menu. And it works different in video. So you can set the quick menu up in video different to what you can in stills. That's the same on the Canon. On the Canon, you've got a display on the top as well, which is quite handy, particularly if you've got it set up on a tripod and you're just looking down at the camera. You can see, you know, you can see what your settings are clearly on the top of the camera. To get into video with this one, you have to, it's a little bit convoluted, but you have to hit the mode button. If I try and do this and see what I'm doing, hit the mode button and the info button, and then that will take you to video mode info. No, it isn't. it's info mode. There we go. Info mode. It's info mode, not mode info. It probably works the other way around, but now we've gone into video mode. Once you get used to it, I mean, I'm trying to do it by looking at it and not looking at it, if you know what I mean, but once you get used to it, it's absolutely fine. And you've got your full manual control on video. You've got your programmed automatic. It's not that you would ever use that. Manual, shutter priority, etc, etc. All the sort of same modes that you have on the S5. So far, they're both kind of very similar. The grip on the Canon is great. I really do like the grip on the Canon. Very, you know, but again, the grip on the Panasonic is great as well. So, you know, they're both great. Now, if you look at video features, now this is where we really are going to see a big difference, and this is where I think if you're more into video, the Panasonic will almost certainly be the better camera to get, without a shadow of a doubt. But if you're more into stills, they're both going to be equally as good as each other. If I really had to push it, I would probably say if you're more into stills, maybe the Canon, for two reasons. Firstly, it has got that 30 megapixel sensor, and it's a great sensor, although the dynamic range isn't quite as good as what you get off for Panasonic. But the lens selection is phenomenal, because you can buy, or actually most times it comes with it, you can buy the EF to RF adapter, so you can convert your, well, not convert them, you can adapt your Canon EF lenses to work on the RF bodies, and they work beautiful. You get perfect autofocus, you get perfect everything, exposure, etc, etc. And there's a massive range of Canon EF lenses. That isn't the same with the L mount. Now the L mount is basically Sigma, Panasonic and Leica, so they call it the L mount alliance, but the range of lenses is very limited. Leicas are incredibly expensive, and there isn't a great deal of Sigma and Panasonic lenses around at the moment. And if you try adapting lenses, I've got the Sigma MC21 adapter, so you can adapt Canon EF lenses, but they only work in single point focus. They won't work in continuous autofocus. So for video, hopeless. But not on the EOS R. It's great on the EOS R. Adapted lenses, Canon EF lenses, or you know, all EF lenses pretty much work beautiful on the Panasonic. So if you do have a large range of EF lenses and you don't want to sell them, then again, the EOS R may well be, you know, the road to go down. But as we're talking about, or we were talking about video, the EOS R has many limitations, and it could be a deal breaker, and I know it would be a deal breaker for a lot of people. And even to some extent, it is me. I don't use the EOS R anywhere near as much for video as I use all my other cameras for video. And the big reason for that, and there's one big fundamental reason for that, is it doesn't shoot in full frame on the Canon EOS R. It crops in 4K. It does in 1080 if you're shooting 1080, but if you're shooting 4K, which is what a lot of people buy these cameras for, to shoot in 4K, it crops it down to an APS-C sensor. So effectively, instead of being a full frame camera, it becomes an APS-C camera, much like my A6600, which is filming up there, or many other, the Fuji, you know, the Fuji range of cameras. I've got the XS10, which is APS-C. Well, it effectively becomes an APS-C camera, and that's quite kind of sad, isn't it? You're buying a full frame body, but you're shooting in APS-C mode. But the other downside with that, a 24 to 105 lens doesn't become 24 to 105. It becomes 30, whatever it is, 24 times 1.5. That's 37, 38, 40, something like that, isn't it? You're restricted with your wide angle. So it becomes a very limiting 4K camera, effectively. And the Panasonic is full frame throughout. If you stick a full frame lens on the camera, when you go into 4K mode, you're shooting in full frame, which is tremendous. The other thing is the Panasonic is a much more video orientated camera, because it's got your 10-bit codecs, it's got so many video codecs and video features that the Canon can't even dream of. And it's got internal 10-bit 4K recording, where the Canon only outputs 10-bit 4K over the HDMI. This will do it internally, and that is tremendous. So I would say if you're into video, then the Panasonic rules supremely over the Canon, you know, for those particular reasons, mainly because it is a genuine 4K full frame body, and you get that lovely aesthetic of a, you know, full frame body using the Panasonic. Now I mean, that may not be a big issue for some people. You know, I know many people, if you're doing YouTube content, are quite happy with 1080, and you know, the 1080 quality it comes off the Canon is excellent. So again, if you're very much into stills and you're doing some YouTube content and you're happy with 1080, again, the Canon may well be fine, and you're happy with 8-bit internal, you may well be fine. Now something else that does definitely you know, affect a lot of people, particularly if you're an events photographer or videographer, weddings, anything what you can't repeat. The Panasonic may well be a better option, simply because it has your 2 card slots. So on the side here you got slot 1, slot 2 here, 2 card slots, so you've got your built-in redundancy. Very, very important if you're doing something like weddings. I always say weddings particularly because you can't repeat a wedding. So that's got 2 card slots in the side there, and you can either set them up to so you've got redundancy, so it'll record to both, be it video or be it stills, or you can have it as a relay, so when one card fills up it goes on to the other. There's many flexible, you know, options you can use those 2 card slots for, whereas the Canon has only got the 1 card slot. That was a real big letdown when they introduced this camera, that it only had 1 card slot. Now, well, it doesn't really bother me particularly, because with what I do, if I get a screwed up card while I'm doing this, well, it's a hassle, but then I just have to refilm it, you know. Don't really like doing that, but if I have to, I have to, you know. So that one does only have the 1 card slot. So again, for that kind of work, the Panasonic would be, you know, the one to look at. Now, other features that differentiate them, they've both got your HDMI outputs. This has got a micro HDMI out on the side, which is really annoying. That's got mini HDMI out, so it's halfway house between that and a full frame HDMI out. So it's a bit better than micro, but not a great deal. But so that's got micro, that one's got mini, and yeah, both got headphone mic jacks on the side. This has got a headphone mic jack on the side there. The Canon has got its headphone and mic jack on the side here. The flaps are a bit better sealed on the Canon, I think, than what they are on the, you see there, the mini HDMI on the side there. So, and you got your headphone jack on the mic on the side here, mic jacks just under those flaps there. And you know, I don't know what more there is to say about these 2 cameras really. The Canon has got this rather funky touch bar, which I've done a review on this touch bar and what I think of it. I put a link into that video up here somewhere. You might find that quite useful to look at. I actually find this touch bar really handy. I've got it programmed for adjusting my audio levels when I am doing video with this camera, and that will just take the videos up, the audio levels up and down. And I've got it also set up, if I touch it, for adjusting turning the histogram on and off. So you see that'll come on and that'll come off. So, you know, Canon have put a lot of thought into this camera. Although it's a few years old now, it's getting on a bit, but, you know, 3-inch articulating screen, good quality screen. I do find the viewfinder on the Canon better than the viewfinder on the Panasonic, and the eye relief on the Canon is better than the eye relief on the Panasonic. I don't think it's by a lot, but I put in the video somewhere in the video what the viewfinder specs are on the two cameras, but I think my guess is, based on using them, that the Canon is a higher res one than what the Panasonic one is. But I haven't looked it up, so I don't know, but I will look it up and I'll tell you. We've said about lenses. Now, as I say, both have full frame sensors. This one, the Panasonic, is 24. The shines of light, there we go, it's 24 sensor in that one, but the Canon is 30. Now, one nifty little feature that the Canon has, if you're doing a lot of outdoor photography and a lot of outdoor filming, and you do need to interchange lenses quite regularly, particularly if you're down, you know, at the beach, or you're in windy conditions, or you're in rainy conditions. Not that I would suggest you change lenses in bad weather, so I wouldn't, but if we take the lens off the Canon EOS R and you look there, you can't see the sensor. It automatically brings a shutter down that protects the sensor from any damage, any dust, any moisture, whatever. And that's a great feature. Interestingly, I don't think Canon have implemented that on the R5 and the R6 and any of the other R cameras. It's really odd. It certainly wasn't on the RP. I mean it's a great feature. It really does help protecting those tiny little dust marks that you get on the sensors. Sony are very prone to it, and they're really annoying. So there we go. But yeah, I think, you know, either camera is going to get you the results you need. It's really going to be great, particularly if you're taking stills. But I do think that the Panasonic will win hands down for video, because of the internal 10-bit codecs. It's using the full frame part of a sensor. It's not cropping it down for 4K. You know, those features alone. It's got Vlog, 10-bit Vlog built into the camera. Now, Vlog is basically a log profile. It's a flat profile, so when you edit it, you can recover your shadows and you can recover your highlights. It's a great way for editing, and it's what professionals use, and it's 10-bit. In here, it's 8-bit. C-Log is built into it, but it's 8-bit. You're better off outputting it via the HDMI lead to something like an Atomos Ninja 5 or something like that. But again, that shows that the video features that Panasonic have included in the S5 are phenomenal. It's a great video camera. Autofocus is a very contentious issue. The Canon scores over the Panasonic, no doubt about that whatsoever, head and shoulders above the Panasonic. It's got great face tracking, face and eye tracking, and object tracking. The Canon is just so good. It's got dual pixel autofocus with the Canon. The Panasonic relies on its, I believe, outdated depth from defocus. It's basically a fancy word for contrast detect autofocus on the Panasonic. So if autofocus is really crucial to you, then again it might be worth looking at the Canon. Even for video, it may well be worth looking at the Canon. You might find the Panasonic won't hold up. Now, I'm using the Panasonic with autofocus all the time. I've got my two GH5s set up here for autofocus, and they're both on autofocus, although I'm hoping they're not pulsing. We do get a bit of pulsing in the background occasionally, and I'm hoping we're not getting that now. So I've readjusted the autofocus parameters. I've turned them right down, and which I have done on the S5. So that has helped to reduce the pulsing. But all the Panasonics, regardless of which one you use, all the Panasonics do suffer with this pulsing in the background, and they do suffer. The autofocus, because it's contrast detect, is not as good as what you'll get from the Sony's autofocus and the Canon's dual pixel autofocus. But if you're working behind the camera, as many pros do, they will work either with manual focus, so you won't have that issue anyway, And that's what the Panasonic, I guess, that's one of the areas that Panasonic think, well, we're selling our cameras mainly to, well, not mainly, a big part of our market is professionals. They'll be behind the cameras, so they can use manual focus. You know, don't really care about autofocus. I don't know what goes through their mind. I don't know why they haven't gone into using phase detect autofocus points. Olympus have with their Micro Four Thirds cameras, Panasonic haven't. I don't know, although that's not Micro Four Thirds, that's full frame, but it's the same system. They're using exactly the same system. So autofocus for Canon definitely scores. So it's battery life, much of a muchness. They're both very similar. The LPE6 battery gets the same sort of life as what the new battery does on the S5. I think it's a power hungry camera, the S5. That's probably why you know, battery life isn't as good. I mean, the Sonys are the best. They're phenomenal. I love the Sonys. I can put a battery in that Sony A6600 or my A7C and forget about it for days, weeks before I have to worry about charging it up. But the new battery for the S5, it's got, it can work in the GH5, but the GH5 batteries won't work in the S5 because of the contacts, extra contacts that are on this battery. But it's okay, but it's not great, but it's okay, you know. So yeah, I think to summarize, you know, after this, this may well have muddied the waters even more. I may not have made it even clearer as to which camera is better, and the reason why I can't make it clear, because they're both great cameras. So but to summarize, if I really had to summarize, for video I would choose the Panasonic, for stills I would choose the Canon. Me, that's what I would do, and that's what I do. Although, you know, I want all my viewers to realise I'm not knocking the Panasonic for stills either, because they're brilliant stills that come off for Panasonic. I know if I was going out somewhere and I weren't sure what I was going to be doing, I would definitely take the Panasonic, because I know if I do need to capture video, that'll do it beautifully, and capturing stills, that'll do it beautifully as well. Just have to watch the autofocus with video, and you know, if you're behind the camera, not an issue. For stills, the depth from defocus works great, not an issue. So it's fast, it's tenacious, it works, you know, excellently. But for video, not. You need to work around it. It's not quite so bulletproof. So there we go. That's the kind of comparison between the Panasonic S5 and the Canon EOS R. The S5, I say, is a newer model, so I suppose there is newer tech in it, and it's going to be that bit better, possibly. But hope you found that useful. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so and you like the content that I produce. I enjoy making these videos, and I'm finding I'm getting some really positive comments and feedback in the, you know, the comment sections of these videos, and that is great. I really like that. But hit the like button if you found this useful. So thanks very much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos relating to video and photography. Cheers for now. Bye.